And the passion that you have for this area of health, I mentioned, goes back over 30 years, therefore before, I think your husband was governor when it started. I looked in the research, I thought maybe there's a family antecedent. Sometimes people learn as children, they see that happening to a relative. I didn't see that. Maybe it was there. Where does your interest spring from?
Well, there was a big expose, of, as I said, of our Central State Hospital in the late 1959, I think it was. And Jimmy ran for governor in 1966 first. He'd been in the state senate. And I campaigned. It was a time when people were, I think there was one regional hospital being built. The people were, they were being moved out of the institution, Central State Hospital. And we had built, there was a regional hospital here in Atlanta. I'm not sure whether there were others or not, but it was at a point when they were turning them out with not enough places for them to go. And I had so many people ask me what my husband would do if governor about mentally ill family member. And it just became a common question when I was campaigning. And so one day I asked Jimmy what he was going to do for mentally ill people when he was governor. And he said, we're going to have the best program in the country, and I'm going to put you in charge of it. Well, of course he didn't do that because I didn't know anything about the issue then, but somebody heard me ask him that and heard that conversation. And there were a few advocates in Atlanta that just descended on me and said, we need you. Well, that was 1966. He lost that election and ran again 4 years later. And as soon as he was in office, he appointed the Governor's Commission to improve services to the mentally and emotionally handicapped. And that began my education about it. And the more I learned about the issue and how much people needed help and what poor services we had. I always said that mental health gets what's left over after everything else in health is funded. But we had a good program in Georgia, and then had a good program when Jim was president. But it has absorbed me for a very long time.
And when he became president, he did it again. He put
That's right.
He made you honorary chair, and eventually there was legislation in 1980. And I read a journalist assessing activist first ladies saying that you, Rosalynn Carter, got it done quietly and quickly because she knew her subject. Were you, when you were doing that, were you mindful of hurting political sensibilities, or?
Well, it was not a popular issue to work on. I had a really hard time getting any publicity about it. I know one time I met a White House reporter in the hallway at the White House. There's a hallway in the bottom floor where people go from, that work in the White House, from one building to another, from the president's West Wing to the East Wing. And I met this reporter, and I was fussing because nobody from the press office covered my mental health meetings. And she said, well, Mrs. Carter, mental health is just not a sexy issue. And that's what I had to put up with. It was really hard to get them to cover it. And I didn't want them to cover it just to show people I was doing something. I wanted them to cover it because back then, that was a long time ago. And when Jim was governor, and even when he was president, people didn't talk about mental health issues very much. The only thing that I thought I could do when he was governor was, of course, help with some services, and we developed a lot of community mental health centers. But the most important thing I thought I could do was bring the issue out into the open and talk about it and have articles about it in the paper and on stories on radio and in newspaper, just to get the issue out, because at that time, if somebody had a mentally ill person in the family, they didn't tell anybody, and they kept them hidden, kind of out of sight. And I thought just to start conversation about it was, and so I really wanted some coverage about it just to get the
But at the same time,
out.
the press respected you and left you alone with it. It wasn't sexy, but are you grateful that they didn't make your job or your life impossible, as they did with Mrs. Clinton and
Yes.
health insurance?
Yes, yes.
And
it worked out fine. I mean, it worked out. I got some legislation through Congress. It didn't last very long because a new president came in.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Were you disappointed the funding was cut off? Was that a big heartbreaker for you?
It was. In fact, what happened was that instead of funding my legislation, they did block grants to states. Well, if a state had a poor system, it probably still had a poor system. In one state I know, the lobby for substance abuse programs was stronger than one for mental health, so mental health services went down because the money comes from the same pot.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all, the recommendations of our President's Commission when Jim was president have served as the guideline all of these years ever since for states who wanted to do good programs, and I've just been really, really excited about it and pleased about that.
And when you came Act 3, so to speak, in this quest of yours was, of course, when in '82 when you and Jimmy Carter founded this center. You wanted this to be the. I was shocked though. I read the background. I know the scene. I think it's been replayed. It's a cliche now. It's been replayed every time. The last flight on Air Force One. Secret Service detail says bye-bye. The boxes. Nobody to unpack them. They're in the hallway. But you were both of you $1 million in debt with your peanut business in ruins. I had not known that.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been the most incredible come down.
Well, about 2 weeks after we lost the election, we had a great, thriving business when we left Georgia. I left for the governor's mansion, and then to when Jimmy left to be president, when he became president. And so the administrator of our blind trust came to see us about 2 weeks after the lost election and said we were $1 million in debt. The blind, whoever took over
blind is the proper word.
Whoever took over the business to run it while we were gone just didn't do a good job.
Did you?
We thought it was, well, the shock of, the losing the election was so bad that this, what can hurt more? But we really thought we were going to lose our farms, our house. We didn't have any idea what we were going to do. Fortunately, Archer Daniels Midland was a big company that was in the corn,
yeah.
Mm-hmm, and soybean business. They decided that year to go in the peanut business and bought up about 30 peanut buying places,
including the most famous one of all. Yeah.
Including ours. What we would have done without that, I have not the slightest idea, because nobody had ever bought a peanut buying place. It was actually a farm supply business. We sold seed in the planting season, and then bought the farmers' products in the fall.
And I think you may have been helped by the fact that, and it's one of the things that draws admiration to you and Mr. Carter, you're not socialites, you don't care about social standing, you don't care about flaunting a lifestyle. It's a little bit easier. These are terrible circumstances, but it's a bit easier when you don't want to show off, you just want to live your life, and everything you've done since then has been along those lines. You've not acquired any kind of extravagant lifestyle, and I guess that's your values. Well,
we had so many things we wanted to do when we left the White House. I mean, we didn't. He was retired involuntarily, you remember, in 1980.
Well put.
80, and what was my mental health work? I didn't want to leave it. It was, it was really important to me. Jimmy had things he wanted to do, and so we spent a lot of time trying to decide what we're going to do with the Carter Center. We didn't want it just to be a presidential library that just sat there with papers from the administration and so forth. And the Carter Center actually developed more than we ever dreamed it would. But Jimmy, at first he thought, I woke up one night, he was sitting straight up in the bed. This was really unusual because he goes to sleep and sleeps all night long. I thought he was sick. I said, what's the matter? He said, I know what we can do at the Carter Presidential Library. We can have a place to resolve conflicts, kind of like Camp David, where people come. So that was kind of the germ of the idea.
Yeah, right there.
And so, but then you don't just go out and resolve conflicts. And so the first thing we had a chance to do was an agriculture program in Africa, and being a farmer, that appealed to him. And so we started that. And then Dr. Bill Fagey, who had been head of the Centers for Disease Control, came to be our executive director. Jimmy talked him into coming here. He's absolutely wonderful. And he drew health programs that we got involved in health in the developing world. And then what happened was we in those countries doing good things with health and agriculture and so forth. if a head of state had a conflict, a potential conflict, or if there was a war, revolutionaries threatening and so forth, Jimmy could say, let me help you with this. So it just evolved. So they all work together. It looks like we're doing a lot of different things, but they all work together. If people are poor and hungry and oppressed, they rise up. Revolutions begin.
And I
so
remember there was a famous, weren't you up in Harlem or in the South Bronx, knocking nails into new housing? Or so it was also domestic. It was also an initiative here.
Well,
not just
Habitat for Humanity is just a program that we're involved with. We work on that 1 week a year. But all the rest of it is Carter Center, where we have the health issues. We're in 65 countries in the world, the poorest, most poorest, most isolated in the world, with our health programs. And we say we work on peace and health. It all kind of works together.